Welcome to today's interview on Brighteon.com. I'm Mike Adams, the founder of Brighteon. And if you've ever wondered who's really in charge of our world, well, there are people who have dedicated decades of their lives to researching that question and digging up answers. Even though the globalists, as we sometimes call certain groups, they try to hide their origins and who they really are, what their names really are, and so on. There are researchers like our guest today, Dean Henderson, who are digging into not just globalism, but the elites, the royal bloodlines and so on that have ruled our world for millennia and continue to do so in a number of nefarious ways. So Dean Henderson, welcome to the show. I know you have a page on Substack. It's deanhenderson.substack.com. And you also have a number of books that we'll talk about on Amazon and other booksellers. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, Mike. It's great to be on.
It's great to have you on. Someone brought to my attention some of your work recently that I thought was spot on. And I'd like you to sort of introduce yourself to our audience in terms of the scope of what you do. And what's the big picture that people need to know in order to even get into this interview here about who runs the world and what their goals are?
Sure. Well, I started out, I grew up on a farm in South Dakota. I was still sheltered from the rest of the world for my first 18 years of life. It would shock you. I went to college and started learning and got a master's eventually, where I dug into the Gulf War in 1991. And while I was doing my thesis, I got some pushback from even my thesis advisors about, I'd found out, for example, the Rockefellers owned 4% of Chevron, 5% of Exxon. I said, well, we can't talk about that. It doesn't matter. And I was like, well, why doesn't that matter? That's where it kind of tipped me into the world of conspiracy facts, I would call them. So published a 144-page thesis on the Gulf War, and it was about the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is, the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, the United Arab Emirates, and Oman, which basically Gulf Cooperation Council was set up by Reagan in 81 to counterbalance the nationalist Arabs in the region like Gaddafi and the Iranians and the Iraqis and the Algerians and so forth, and to really tip the oil scales in the favor of the Western bankers instead of the Arab people who sit on the oil and own the oil, should own the oil.
So this is a typical effort by the West to go in and subjugate people against their own local interests in order to benefit the West.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's going on in Israel today is it's a result of 75 years. You have to realize Israel is the latest colonial project for these people. So, they've colonized the entire planet. We can get into the whole 8,500 year history of that and how they've kind of farmed humanity and robbed us of everything we have, including our land. United States, 300 years ago, 99% of the people lived on land in the country. Nowadays, it's flipped to where less than 1% of the people live on land. So they've literally stolen our land. The short story is they've literally just stolen our land and all our resources, and they continue to do so. So Israel's the latest colonial settler project, and that's why it's the most raw. And, it's a construct that was set up in the Middle East has nothing to do with protecting Jewish people or being a Jewish homeland or anything. It's just part of this Zionist project, which was to set up a base in the Middle East where they could set up and they could sort of stir up the Arabs against each other and keep them at war with each other, so that we could steal the oil. And then the Saudis are the same exact thing on the other side, on the Muslim side, which again shows you it's not about religion. It's about the Balfour Declaration, 1917, letter penned to Lord Walter Rothschild by this Arthur Balfour, wanting to set up a Jewish homeland in British Palestine. And then it's about the Treaty of Jeddah, which set up the Saudi regime and all these little emirates. And beneath those emirates in the Saudi Arabia, that's 42% of the world's oil. So, it's just all been a colonial settler project from day one. They use settlers to go in and they put them in harm's way, and they let them do the fighting for them. And yeah, man, they just count the money in the city of London, which is the base of operations for all this, which is the entity that's behind not just Israel, but the United States government at this point, which uses like a Hessianized mercenary army to protect its interests. We're not protecting anybody's interests by going into Israel. We're not protecting any American interests by going into Ukraine. We're protecting the city of London's interests. So we're pretty much a mercenary force for this banker cabal in the city of London, which in the end is controlled by bloodlines, these old bloodlines. And it's Anunnaki crown is what it is. That's what I call it, because
Interesting.
they came here from, somewhere else into Samaria 8,500 years ago. And the first king on the planet was King Sargon in Samaria. And that's a fact. And the whole idea of kingship is the idea that somehow because of your blood or your blood type or your DNA, or maybe your genetic makeup, or the fact that you're part hybrid alien, maybe, you have the divine right of kings, over people to do whatever you want. And then they launched religion to hide behind. They hid behind the Catholic Church for a time. They hid behind the Protestant Church for a time. Now they're hiding behind science through the Royal Societies. So it doesn't mean religion's bad. Doesn't mean science is bad. It just means these people have hijacked these things and hidden behind it and use it as kind of a shield of, to give themselves some sort of moral justification for their colonialism. Nothing more than that.
No, first of all, this is fascinating, and I want to encourage people to check out your books on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Again, folks, our guest is Dean Henderson, so a pretty easy name to look up there. But it seems to me, Dean, that what the globalists have done here, or these maybe that's not the right term, these bloodlines, these elitist bloodlines, that during this 8,500 year history, for most of that, they wanted humans to populate. They wanted people to reproduce, and so that they could exploit the product of the labor of the people, right? They wanted people to produce and expand and colonize, and then they could tax all of that, and they could, generate new technologies that perhaps the globalists could use and so on. But now it seems to me that it's shifted, where they've gone into extermination mode, where they want a much lower human population. Why, in your research, why is that happening now?
Yeah, it's a really good question, a really important point, because you gotta kind of think about it and think it through. And if you think about it and think it through, the major infrastructure on this planet has already been built, and that's what you're talking about, what they needed us for. I mean, they were, this same bloodline was behind the Royal Africa Company, which was the biggest slave trader by far. It ran 95% of the slave trade. East India Company ran the other 5%. Both of them controlled by the same bloodline families. They were behind the genocide of not just the Native Americans, but indigenous people all over the world, because as soon as the Knights Templar ships started sailing, those were shipbuilding was a big deal. And when they got the ships, when they got the big ships, then they could go all around the world, and they literally looted all these everything, precious metals, precious gems, cultural. They studied the Indians. They actually learned the nature of reality, because they didn't understand it. So they do know the nature of reality, but they don't teach it to us. And that's our biggest problem. Like, we don't understand the nature of reality. We don't understand how it works. So, for example, what these people teach, and these same families sponsored Locke and Malthus and Hobbes and all these crazy philosophers that we still teach our kids in Philosophy 101 classes in every college in this country. And all these people have this real dark view of humanity and of human nature. So one story interesting story came out of Calvin Luther Martin's book, The Real Human Beings, which is a really great book, about the Yupik, his experience with the Yupik Eskimos in Alaska. So they tell this story about how, this hunter goes out, this colonial hunter who was sponsored by some, crown of some country. And he sees a bear get up and stand on two legs and in front of him while he's just walking down the trail, and he just shoots him. And the head goes back to some castle in Europe, whereas the Yupik, the bear would stand up and they would talk to the bear, and they would say, hey, we got plenty of berries for everybody. Let's ease past you here, and everything's fine. And that's the nature reality. The nature reality, as Indian people know and Native people know, is all about relationships, okay, and reciprocity. So if you are in relationships, and if you see yourselves in a relationship, not just with humans, not just with your immediate family, but with trees, with other animals, with rocks, with the earth, with the sun, with the moon, with everything, then it becomes a different perspective that you have on things, and you take care of everything, and you're responsible, and you realize that you owe a lot to these other creatures that sustain you. And it's not some spiritual thing like the left tries to make it out like some woo-woo Indians are real, ooh, they're so spiritual. Not really. It's just science. Okay. It's real science. It's not fake science. It's action, reaction. And these other people, they come in with this mindset of sort of like, let's just get as much as we can. They don't see a circular relationship to things. They see a straight line, and they just go straight down the line, and they're greedy. They just make money. They don't look behind them. They burn bridges. And this is what we're dealing with, this kind of mindset. And what happens when you live like that is you're miserable. You don't have a happy life. You don't have a good life. You're not successful. You may be successful in terms of money or something else, but you end up destroying the earth, destroying your family, destroying everything in your path. And it's just like the Aurora Boreas. It's a snake eating its own tail. And this is the situation we have now.
Dean, that does describe. You're describing, of course, at least Western civilization for sure. I want to ask you about more than that, but the U.S. empire and Western forces, the British Empire before that, were all about just domination, slaughter, pillaging, stealing resources, taking over countries. That's how the U.S. has operated since post-World War II. It's just been coercion, bombing, killing, slaughtering, assassinations, economic sanctions. And yet it seems like in a sense that there's more resistance against that globally, like the US empire is on its last legs, kind of like the British Empire was. But I do want to ask you, what's the relationship between these elite bloodlines, the power they have over the planet? What's their relationship with three things? China, Zionism, and Russia, based on your research?
Yeah, those are all really interesting questions, and I'm afraid I don't have the answer to all of those. I can tell you that they're definitely behind Zionism. I can tell you that they hate Russia, and they always have. And China's a kind of a wild card. I mean, David Rockefeller used to talk about the China model when he talked about, setting up these cheap labor camps and, this surveillance state with cameras everywhere. And certainly that's what the Chinese have done up to this point. But I think China right now is in a transition where, because China is the most interesting one of those three questions you just asked. And China with Xi Jinping, who seems like more of a Maoist, like straight up, not, he's just tired of the West. He's tired of, sort of placating Walmart and letting them come in and exploit their labor for cheap, and then, making things for us for cheap. And it kind of, in a way, it looks like China might have played these guys, because we pretty much developed the country. Chinese middle class was born. They could drive cars. They could all of a sudden have this standard of living that the West has. And we always thought we were playing them, or Kissinger and his buddies did anyway, because Kissinger, when he did détente, with the Chinese in '73, that was all about, well, it was about two things. It was about, depopulation. Okay, you only have one child policy, and we'll do things for you, and we'll bring you these industries, and you provide cheap labor. And Deng Xiaoping carried that policy out. Many people won't know that Mao called Deng Xiaoping a capitalist rotor. He said, this guy's going to sell you out, and he kind of did. But I just think the new guy's different. And I think the incident at Wuhan, and all these biolabs that the U.S. has set up in and around China, in and around Russia, but especially the one in Wuhan. Look, that was the U.S. military, straight up. That was DARPA. That was the Wellcome Trust, which is the Crown's biggest charity, which is run by Jeremy Farrar, who's now the chief scientist at the World Health Organization, and by Fauci. And they were checking out this gain of function research, which should be totally illegal everywhere, and was banned in the United States by President Obama So they had to take it offshore. Well, the Chinese know what happened because the first interview and the only interview I ever saw with the Chinese during COVID was early in the thing. And they said, that's what the guy said. He said, the U.S. military brought this to our country. And they had those World Military Games in October, and that's where they brought it. And there's also some use of 5G in conjunction with it because they rolled that out in Wuhan. And there's something to do with parasites. I believe they're activating some kind of parasites in our bodies with the 5G frequency. And this is part of it too. But at any rate, the Chinese clued into this. And that was immediately after that where you saw the Chinese sort of hit the brakes on their relationship with the West. And because they just realized, yeah, we're trying to kill them. I mean, we didn't release that in our country. We released it in China. So that they consider that an act of war. Now, Russia, I don't know. I personally just, I think Putin's pretty solid. I think, you know, a lot of what's in Russia going on that people don't understand is the resurgence of the Russian Orthodox Church. People are very religious in Russia. At this point, just the opposite of the West, where religion is just kind of this antiquated concept for most people. He doesn't allow 5G. They took down a bunch of towers after realizing it was hurting people. They don't allow GMOs. I don't know. I judge people based on their actions.
All right, Dean, apologies. We just got cut off there in terms of bandwidth. Our fiber optic lines got cut. We've reestablished. So whatever you were talking about there is certainly interesting to a lot of people. But I want to ask you this question anyway. So let's segue to this, which is, what's the end game? Because I see on your website, here you have a headline, Dean and Jill Henderson, Illuminati Agenda 21, the Luciferian plan to destroy creation. And that was on the Richie Allen show. I mean, that's a pretty big end game, but is destroying humanity just an interim goal, or what are their goals here on planet Earth to start with?
Well, they've been here, though. I mean, they've been here the whole time to sort of farm us, okay? So first they did slavery and just flat out just forced people to work for them. And then when that got unpopular enough, and they got some resistance, then they went to this kind of slave wage system that they operate under right now, which is, well, we don't have to house the slaves anymore, feed them. We just pay them kind of a pittance of a wage, and they'll just think, man, everything's great, and then go out shopping in our malls, and then we can make some more money. And yeah, I think your point at the very beginning of this interview is right. I think that now that the infrastructure is built, now that, you know, it's all kind of built, they don't really need as many people, especially men, which is why there's a war on men right now, if you haven't noticed. And so they want to take people out, and, you know, they want to depopulate. And this is what this whole Agenda 21 is all about, and Agenda 2030 now is all about. But the reason I call it Luciferian is because, you know, I'm of the belief that these people are Anunnaki. A synonym of that is Nephilim. Another synonym of that would be AI, or the devil. Take your pick. But these people are not from here. They don't believe in God's creation. They don't, as I said before, understand the nature of reality. They don't count their blessings. They only complain and look for more and more and more. They can never be happy. They can never be satiated. That's because they're fallen angels. That's because, you know, and that's why they make vaccines, because they say, oh, your immune system is shit, you know, and it's all about germs, and you're dirty, and humanity's terrible, and it's your fault. And so mask up, slave, and take your vaccination. And the vaccination is just scientific, you know, fake science, trying to usurp the creator. The same with GMO crops, the same with splitting the atom. You know, they could have done nuclear fusion, which, you know, puts things together, and we could have free energy, but instead they did nuclear fission, which breaks things apart. You know, they could understand that the universe is an electric universe and consistent of plasma as one of the major elements, but no, they focus our attention on particle physics, which again is breaking down things into smaller and smaller pieces until now they're running around this racetrack at CERN trying to find the God particle, because they're insane.
Right.
But they don't believe in God. They don't believe in creator. They think that man, and this is the whole Masonic credo, right? Read Albert Pike, and he talks about Lucifer, the light bearer, you know, like he's the good guy. And so they really just believe that we as human, as human beings, shouldn't believe in a God, and we should become the gods.
But but Dean, I want to ask you more about where this is going on a cosmic scale, because I've been tracking some of this for quite some time. I gave a presentation in 2019 called the Oblivion Agenda, which said that Earth was being prepared for a post-human future. Mm-hmm. And part of that is terraforming. So mm-hmm. under the guise of climate change, they are engaged in terraforming operations, for example, to pull CO2 out of the atmosphere and make Earth a much colder, much dimmer planet, even polluting the skies with stratospheric aerosol injections in order to block the sun. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help but notice, and I spoke about this in 2019, that they're trying to change Earth into a planet that would be like a planet much farther from the sun, right? Like Mars, for example. And these terraforming operations are going on right in front of us. It's all being done under the name of climate change. Is terraforming part of this, and in your research? And if so, then what does that mean? I mean, clearly something other than human intends to colonize Earth next. At least that's my leap of understanding. What do you think?
No, I think it's definitely part of it. And, Saturn is a long ways from the sun too.
Yes.
And but yeah, I mean, I think terraforming is a huge part of it. I also think that the whole transhumanist agenda fits right into that, because, it's not so much that we're going to be, taken over by AI. I mean, that whole story that's been floating around lately, AI is going to take over the world, blah, blah, blah. It's a red herring, because in fact, what they're going to do is they're going to use that problem reaction solution. They're going to say, because AI is going to take over the rest of the world, we have to connect everything to the blockchain, and we have to be able to verify everything, and with a trust stamp or a truth stamp, or, then we can take this thing back. But what's really happening is they're assimilating us into the cult, into the AI cult, into the Nephilim cult, and you can see that with television now. I mean, increasingly the movies and television, it's just all satanic. You can see it. They're marching out the bloodlines to run the companies now openly. The other day I was watching the CNBC Business Channel. I saw this guy, Wells Fargo's CFO. His name's Massimo. Well, Massimo is one of the old Italian black nobility families. And by the way, Wells Fargo was founded by the Massimo family and the Wellesley family, as in Wellesley College, which is supposedly this liberal college, right? And so the Khans, Khan, the mayor of London is a Khan, the president of Pakistan, the prime minister was a Khan. These Khans are coming out, Khan. That's a big bloodline name, because they're not all white Europeans. These bloodlines, Li family in China is one of the big bloodlines. LI, and they ran the Tang dynasty, and it was with them that the Rothschilds traded over the Silk Road back when the Rothschilds were known as the Baccarat family, which was just post Babylon, and then they became the Bauer family and worked for the German House of Hesse, and that's where they got their wealth. And then they married into the royal families. They weren't originally one of the royal bloodlines. They weren't originally in the club. But they married, and they borrowed money to monarchs to marry into it and become part of the bloodline. So they were trading with the Li family. There's also the Sikhs. The Sikhs are an interesting bunch. The guys that wear turbans, they all have the same last name, and that's a big bloodline in Asia. So,
but Dean, Europe, I mean, this is fascinating. But allow me to interject. I'm still wondering, when these people get together in their own secret rooms and secret conversations to plan what's next, what are they saying to each other? Like, 10 steps to conquering the world, and we're on step 7, what's next? And where does this end?
Right. Well, I think the COVID martial law experiment, it failed, and give credit to us.
Yeah.
Give credit to the resistance, because we backed them off. They knew they had to back off. Especially, I'd say the Canadian truckers deserve special. They should get an award. We should have an award ceremony for those guys. But we backed them off of that, right? And now, like 5% of the American population is going to get a booster shot, right?
2%, but in the last numbers, yeah.
I've heard from some people, I've heard 2%. So at any rate, we won the information war, and we're doing okay. I mean, that's what people need to know too, is that we're doing okay. We're doing okay. We've taken this internet, which was an attempt by DARPA, which created the internet as ARPANET, to enslave us with fake information. And we have taken that and we've thrown it back in their face, and we've gotten the real truth out there, amazingly, really. And they underestimated us the whole way, and they didn't think we could pull it off. And that's why they have to censor people. I got knocked out in 2019. My Left-Hook site just disappeared. My bank account was frozen. I got it knocked out back in 2014 as well. But when they get together, they're going, oh man, that didn't work. So then what do we do right after that? We pivot immediately to Ukraine.
Right.
And so their whole 5G, fourth industrial revolution wet dream is falling apart, because these people are not as smart as you think. Don't give them too much credit. They're really inbred to the point where they can't even think straight. That's the fact. And they're not as smart as we are. We're smarter than they are, way smarter. So that didn't work. The electric cars, oops, Russia's got all the nickel. We can't build batteries. None of this stuff's working. A lot of their stuff not really working like it's supposed to, right? So what do? They bail out of the COVID thing, which the big part of the COVID thing was to push forward the fourth industrial revolution, right? Get everybody to shop online, stay home, stay out of stores, shut the little restaurants down.
Okay, a note to the audience here. My apologies. We have had now two glitches of our communications and our recording system here today, talking with Dean. And so we're restarting. This is the third attempt to finish this. I don't know exactly where we left off. So Dean, let me start the most recent question again, which is that I couldn't help but notice in looking at the treatment of the Palestinians by Israelis in Gaza Strip, that so many properties of Gaza resemble so-called 15-minute cities, which are being pushed by, the climate cultists and the climate globalists as a means to trap and enslave people, and then to monitor everything, to control what they view, to control their food, to control their water, control their travel. I mean, we've even seen outright calls for that under climate change agendas to say, oh, you're only going to be allowed to take one plane ride every 3 years. You're only going to be allowed to buy 3 items of clothing. I mean, there are over a dozen U.S. cities that are now on board with this, and meat will be banned. You won't be able to eat any meat. I mean, this experiment that Israel has been running against the Palestinians in Gaza, it seems to me that this is a pilot program for a globalist experiment of how to enslave and exterminate billions of human beings, starting with 15-minute cities. Does that resonate with what you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. That's why a lot of U.S. troops and European troops have been sent to Israel to train in urban warfare, because this is exactly what's coming. And there's, every neighborhood's going to have these thugs running it and keeping us down. And also, the other aspect of that is Israel. The ultimate goal of Israel is a greater Israel. So, that's why Egypt won't open the border. I mean, they'd have to be nuts, because once the Palestinians get pushed out of there, they're not going to let them back.
That's right.
And they don't care if they kill them all, if they jump into the ocean, or if they go to Egypt, to the Sinai Peninsula, and live in refugee camps. They really don't care. But also they've already got the Golan Heights. They want parts of Jordan. They want parts of Lebanon. And so another important thing about Israel, you have to realize, it's just Jordan Maxwell pointed this out brilliantly one time, and it's so true. Israel, if you look at the Eurasian landmass, all the way from, say, Oslo to Singapore, all the way from Vladivostok to, say, Namibia, on cross angles, where that's all one landmass. Guess what sits right in the very center? Israel.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So Israel is always going to be, and that's why the Bible was wrote about Israel, because even back then it was important. I mean, the Bible could have been written anywhere, maybe, but there was a number of areas it could have occurred in, but it occurred there because it's always been so strategic. It's always been a smuggling route, a trade route. They cut almost the diamonds in the world are cut in Israel, and all kinds of stuff goes through there. So it's they need this place in the Middle East. And another aspect to consider, which I believe is coming, is they're going to build. Probably the Temple Mount is going to get dusted in this next round, and that could precipitate really bad things.
Right.
But this third temple they talk about, which is being built by the Rothschilds, which Israel was founded by the Rothschilds. This is where they want the seat of world government, for the reason I just explained. And my view is that the ultimate goal is to get rid of nation states completely and have a world government based in Israel. And my candidate to run that right now is definitely Prince William. because
Really?
Prince William is not Charles's son. Okay, he's Diana's son, and she had a tryst with King Juan Carlos of Spain. And it wasn't so much of a love affair at all. It was just a eugenics project, because that's what these people do. So, King Juan Carlos has the Bourbon, the Frank, the Merovingian, and the Habsburg bloodline. Diana has the Stuart, the Sinclair, and the Merovingian bloodline. It's a very powerful bloodline. If these people are Anunnaki hybrids, then they want the ruler of this global thing, and he'll be introduced as the return of Christ, probably.
The Antichrist.
Yeah, but he'll actually be the Antichrist. Exactly. And if you look at Willie, I mean, he's got an elongated skull. I mean, he just does. I mean, if you can't see that, you don't have eyes to see. And he's bald at the age of 10, so I don't know. There's all these different things going on. Yep.
Yeah. Well, the events taking place right now do have a biblical feel to them, or almost a prophecy type of feel, especially when you talk about maybe the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the building of the Third Temple and so on. But isn't it possible that Israel and the West have massively miscalculated? They have overplayed their hand. The U.S. military is actually very weak. We saw Janet Yellen yesterday saying that the U.S. can afford a two-front war. Well, in reality, the U.S. can't afford even a zero-front war, because the U.S. is broke and has run out of munitions to send to Ukraine, much less to try to send much of anything to Israel. And the U.S. military, 70% of the Army soldiers, active duty, are now obese or overweight. So what are you going to have, like the fat squad rolling in with no ammunition? What are you going to just like smash everybody? It's becoming a clown show rooted in wokeism and transgenderism. What are you going to have, like bra waving, high heel, obese drag queen army soldiers rolling in? Versus, by the way, Hamas fighters and Hezbollah fighters who, no matter what you think of their politics, and in my view, those are terrorist organizations, clearly, but they are fit, they are hardened, they've lived in very hard times, and they have nothing left to lose, and they are actual fighters, warriors, who will outfight any number of Western soldiers, including woke Israeli reservists who just want to make TikTok videos and play with video games, and they're about to find themselves in a real war in tunnels underneath Gaza. But anyway, my main question is: has the West overzealously miscalculated their strength?
Absolutely. It's and Biden, he's dangerous. I mean, he needs to be sort of immediately removed from office, because this ain't corn pop.
Right.
I mean, this is serious, and he's always been this guy. He wants to be the tough guy. He's not a tough guy, obviously, but he wants to come off like this tough guy. My God, we've sent 2 aircraft carrier groups. We sent 2 more Navy ships today, actually ships full of Marines, troops. Sent 2,000 troops on standby, they announced this morning. Here we go again. And
you're still good. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And the important thing, to go back to Hamas, the fact that these attacks were planned not only by Hamas, but these 3 other organizations. The fact that Hamas was democratically elected in 2007. So even though Hamas was started by Israel, even though the Saudis funded him, even though they're a Muslim Brotherhood offshoot, the Palestinians have just realized, look, we don't have any choice. We have to put down our differences and all unite. And so when you try to say Hamas is separate from the Palestinian people, that's the start of the big lie, because they're not. They're the democratically elected government. They've been there for 16 years, and that's just the fact. So, if you want to say that, you might as well say the Democratic Party is a terrorist organization because Biden's running the country or whatever. It's just, so that's the beginning of the propaganda lie right there. But absolutely, they've underestimated it, Mike. And that place is wired up to the max. And the minute they cross the border, Hezbollah is going to open a northern front. They've already said as much. Iran has said as much. China's meeting today with Putin in Beijing. This is getting serious, and they don't. I just think they're arrogant. A lot of the problem with the West. You talk about, the U.S. empire. Well, the fact of the matter is, the Sumerian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Egyptian Pharaoh Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, the British Empire, and now the U.S. Empire. It's the same damn empire. Okay, it's the same bloodline that's always run it. It never died. None of these things died. My last book, Royal Bloodline with Tico and the Great Remembering, I talk about how the Egyptian pharaoh, the last one was Cleopatra. Okay, she had an affair with Julius Caesar as well as Mark Antony. It was Julius Caesar that came in and burned down the library at Alexandria. And within 9 years of the last pharaoh, Cleopatra, being deposed, and she was deposed in a revolution. People don't realize that the Egyptian people rose up against the pharaohs because pharaohs didn't even speak Arabic. I mean, these coneheads, where were they from? You know, and so within 9 years, the Holy Roman Empire started. When the Holy Roman Empire wound down, within it was actually 9 years again, the British Empire, the Pax Britannica, started up. And so it's been a seamless transition, and all it is this bloodline moving locations, moving to different locations. And their next location is going to be Israel, right? That's where they're going to base it. The City of London is the current location. The banks are in Switzerland, and they want to set it up in Israel to be the governing area.
But if they survive, I mean, the London financial system is about to crater. The dollar is cratering. The derivatives debt burden on Western financial systems, you know, the whole infrastructure of Western finance is on the precipice of imploding, right?
Yeah, Deutsche Bank is pretty much done. And this is interesting because this is right when COVID started. Okay, it was in September of 2019 that the Fed opened the repo window, and Deutsche Bank come begging for money, and they borrowed it to them at like 15%. And they were essentially bankrupt. And if we hadn't had a COVID crisis, the economy would have just tanked, and the stock market would have tanked right then. But a crisis always bails them out. But I think the point is they're going to lose. I really believe that. And, you know, from my perspective, we're going to suffer. Americans are going to suffer. It's sad that people like us have to suffer for the sins of these dirtbags that run our country. But we're gonna suffer. But you know what? I don't care, Mike. I mean, I've been at this for 40 years. I cut my teeth in activism in, like, say, 1989 at South Dakota State University, which is an ag school. And I met this group of Palestinians who were there to study ag engineering, because at that time they did, you know, a lot of transfers with students, and they brought them over here to train them, and they'd go back and help build their country. Or, you know, it was just a more sane time. And they were just some of the nicest people I ever met, and I immediately started supporting the Palestinian cause at that point. That's been 40 years, and I am just so tired of these people, and I'm so tired of the bloodshed, and so I'm ready for whatever comes. But it could very well be, ironically, as Edgar Case pointed out and many others, that Russia, China will save the day, and that America going down. But as long as the bankers go down with them, I'm fine. And when we got cut off earlier, we were talking about China, and this is a critical question. Has China turned its back on the bankers? You know, because they tried to use it as this surveillance society model, this cheap labor model. But has China now broken with the Illuminati, with the families? And my sense is they have, but I'm just not sure yet. Nobody knows until it's crunch time, but we'll see what happens. But there's going to be really tough times coming here. I mean, not in months, but in weeks. And we're at a crossroads here where maybe we have the best chance ever of taking these people out, like forever, because that's all we got. And we have to do it. I don't care. It's been 8,500 years. The same bloodline comes to Earth, enslaves humanity. The Sumerian clay tablets, the oldest language in the world, the cuneiform tells us that the Sumerians said they were forced into agriculture. So, and then these coneheads go and run the cities of Babylon and Ur and get fed for free, and then form Babylon and all this other stuff, and on. But they've just, for 8,500 years, they've abused us, they've farmed us, they've beaten us bloody, and we've taken it. And there's been resistance all the time, but we need a bigger awareness, not a resistance, but an awareness of who's running the show, which is why I dedicate my life to the head of the snake. Who are they? It's the Habsburg family that really you'd have to point to is the one, the name of the bloodline. Okay, I'm just going to name it as the Habsburgs, because Constantine the Great was a Habsburg. He's the one in 225 AD that usurped the Catholic Church from Peter back when it was good, back when it was Jesus' word, and turned it into something that's just corrupt and everything else. He's the one, or it was Charlemagne. Charlemagne was a Habsburg. You know, they say every president in the United States is related to Charlemagne. Well, she's a Habsburg, and the Habsburgs are definitely the most powerful.
Let me ask you about, what about the Pope entity creature, and the Vatican, the role of the Vatican, and the city of, Vatican City, and the Club of Rome, and all of that. I mean, what's the links with the bloodlines there?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, again, once Constantine the Great had co-opted the Catholic Church, he started issuing all these papal bulls. You know, many people don't know that before that time, in 225 AD, Christ wasn't considered a Messiah. He wasn't, you know, he didn't want to be considered a Messiah. He said, each of you have to take the responsibility to be the way, the truth, and the light. The way, simple living, traveling in the mountains with nothing on your back. Okay, so that's the first thing. Don't get enamored with possessions. The truth, tell the truth, including talking and speaking about the powers that run this world in a satanic way, which he did, and was killed for it by the Habsburgs, who have this spear of destiny in their castle in Belgium to this day. And supposedly they gave it to Hitler, and supposedly they just gave it to Klaus Schwab 3 years ago. So it's this whatever magic thing they think. They got nothing. But the other thing is, and then the light, and the light is just compassion, especially for those that don't have as much as you. Like, say, maybe the Palestinians in Gaza who live like slaves in a cage for 75 years. So once they took control of the Catholic Church, and then they hid behind it, you know, and then they said, well, and that's what makes people hate the Catholic Church. The Pope is an invention of these people, of course, but there was a falling out. It's important to know, in the 12th century, 13 something, yeah, whatever that is, 13 something, can't remember the exact year, but Pope Clement got together with King Philip of France, and they went after the Templars. And the Templars were not, you know, people think that was a religious order or something because they listened to too much CIA on the History Channel, which is pretty much all that is anymore. That History Channel is all CIA people. And they want to tell you that aliens are our saviors and stuff like this. And they were so smart and they brought us all this great science and whatever. It's just lies, okay? But propaganda. And so they want you to hate the Catholic Church. Why? Because the Catholic Church, despite all its problems, is probably the most powerful organization in the world that could oppose the Illuminati. That's why they marched out Dan Brown and all his movies and books and all this stuff. But they hid behind the Catholics for a while. Then when there was this falling out and they went after the Templars took their loot and they went to Venice. And that's when the Venetian banking families got going, the Bancos, the De Medicis, the Bards. And they established the idea of fascism, where they grouped the power of their families together with arms, and they kept the people at bay, and they pretty much ran that region. Well, then for Venice, they went and became the Hanseatic League in the Netherlands, and they became the Dutch East India Company. And then they moved to where? The United Kingdom. Just consider the name. That's what it is. Okay, that's where the royalty, the bloodlines, the kings and queens, and all their dukes and lords. And you know, if you got a title, you're a bad person. I'm sorry. You did bad things. That's why you get the title. And so they moved to the United Kingdom. Why? Because it's got a rocky coastline. It's an island. At that time, they had the ships, and nobody else did, and they could sort of establish themselves there and keep their money safe. So the Templars took their money mostly to Scotland. And then they got help from the Sinclair family, which is one of the bloodline families. And they moved it into the city of London when William III took power. And after the Magna Carta had been signed, which, was supposed to be this great liberating thing that, got people out from under the yoke of the monarchy by sort of including the landowning class, which really weren't any better. But in fact, what it was they just went into cahoots with each other. And the British people got, absolutely nothing out of that. So they brought the money into the city of London. So when they're in Venice, they got behind Martin Luther, because the reason they did is because the Protestants said that, you don't have to do good deeds to go to heaven. You can just, kind of be a shithill. And as long as you say Jesus is your savior, boom, you go to heaven. Kind of like what all these evangelical people do nowadays, which to me is sort of all CIA stuff. But that's why they got behind Martin Luther, okay? And they called it the Protestant Reformation. And which, Reformation of what? And then then they got behind, once they got the money into the city of London, William III, the Scottish, loot that came from the Templars when they were ousted, and there was a lot of it, trillions of dollars worth now. They brought to the city of London. They started the city of London. Shipbuilding became a big deal on the Thames in about the 16th century, and they ran the United Kingdom. And then they got behind at that point, because the Freemasons and the Templars, are pretty much the same thing. And then they got behind science, right? And here comes the open Luciferian rule. And so the Royal Societies, whether it's the Royal Society, whether it's the National Geographic Society, which keeps repeating this lie that, survival of the fittest and, blah, 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 or whether it's the, Royal Physics Society, which keeps us on this particle
or
physics
the Smithsonian.
train.
Don't forget
The
about
Smithsonian,
the role.
which stole everything and all the bones from Indians and tells lies about history as well. And, they just keep, and so they just kind of figured it out. Okay, well, wait a second. This will give us more legitimacy than religion, because people are kind of getting, they're wondering about religion. Is it really real? So now we'll go to science, And so now the current manifestation of what I see, Mike, is wokeism. Now they're hiding behind wokeism.
Right.
And everybody
and you're
somehow,
seeing so-called men of science pivot to wokeism, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, right?
Boom.
Typical guy. He's supposed to be driven by evidence and science and facts. And then all of a sudden it's like, and transgenderism is all real and good and everything. Like, wow.
Right. And by doing this, they're usurping the real left. They're knocking the real left out. They're pushing it out of the way. So, I mean, I'm talking about, again, people like Gaddafi, people like, Che Guevara, people like, there's been a lot of them. Okay. But real revolutionaries who really stood up against the oligarchy and said, we want to be free. We want to help the workers. In Libya under Gaddafi, the workers not only ran the factories, they decided what to make at the factories, and if you ever get a chance to read his green book, everyone should read Gaddafi's green book, because it's amazing. He's the only anarcho-syndicalist president or, leader that we've ever had. And when they said he went to the desert, lived in a tent and did nothing, it's true, because he didn't seize power. He gave other people power, and he didn't want power. And that's what we need.
And that's why Hillary Clinton and others took him out. I mean, it was just murdered by the U.S. empire.
By the wokies, right? By the Clintons, by the wokies.
Yep.
And they're not the left. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is this is not the left. Don't start hating the left, because I'm the left. Don't start hating the real left because these wokies, tried to make you do it. Because this is nothing left about it. All this is a sales pitch by corporations. That's why the NFL and all the corporations, and every time you see an ad on TV, it's like, oh, here's some grass-fed beef. Oh, fuck you, man. I grew up on a farm. We raised 200, 300 head of cattle. What do you think we fed it? Grass. All beef eats grass.
Yeah,
dumbass.
I know.
I mean, and what's wrong with a little corn to finish it anyway? Because it sure tastes a lot better. So what's wrong with corn, right? So, but it's all about virtue signaling. There's nothing behind it. There's no, and in fact, what it does is it takes us away from the conversation about class, right, Mike? I mean, it instead of talking about class and how BlackRock and Vanguard own every corporation in America and how that's the crown money in America hiding, and they control everything, including the Biden administration, who's just full of BlackRock executives. Used to be Goldman Sachs ran it, right? They ran administrations for years. Well, they were the Hofjuden, right? The married-in Jews that helped the oligarchy. Now it's again, they're just out in the open. We're just going to send BlackRock in directly and just run everything. Yeah. And we're supposed to, and they're the ones doing the ESG scores. BlackRock. That's who's behind it.
And I noticed, Dean, I noticed also right now, both RFK Jr. and Donald Trump are offering 100% support for Israel, unlimited funding, send whatever money they need. And of course, Biden, the same thing. So there's nobody that's a viable presidential candidate in the U.S. that is willing to cut off all of this money being sent to Israel, which built walls between Israel and Gaza, while there's no money for walls on the U.S. southern border. I mean, obvious hypocrisy. But everybody that is vying for president of the U.S. is pro-war. That's the sad truth. That's the key. The Democrats are the war party. Obviously, right now they're pushing it, but they're all war party, and that's why you just people just gotta and they use social media. LifeLog, the day it shut down, LifeLog was a DARPA operation. It became Facebook. The very day LifeLog shut down, Facebook started under Zuckerberg. Okay, so the social media is really important to reinforce the idea that there's these two parties and they're so different. And there's this right and this left, and they're so different.
And we're all supposed to pick a camp and get in that camp and stay there and then fight each other, right? And then just go at each other. And this is what they're doing with social media. They're literally tearing apart the fabric of society. At the same time, they're creating this hive mind where everybody thinks the same. And if you don't, you get deleted, you get attacked by the mob. You know, if you have a mind, if you think for yourself, it's not acceptable to do that anymore. So there's nothing left about any of this. There's nothing progressive. There's nothing socialistic about any of this. I haven't seen any wealth being redistributed, you know, for quite some time. So it just kills me to hear that, you know, somehow the left is doing this, the left is doing that. I mean, no, this is just corporations selling you. They're trying to sell you. Why? Because they got freaked out by Bernie running in 2016 and almost winning the primary. And they said, well, we got to do something about that. We got to appeal to these people, but we got to keep them in a box. We can't let them talk about class. Oh, I know. Let's have them talk about gender. Let's have them talk about Black Lives Matter, which is a George Soros organization, which is run by a woman last name Khan, Khan.
No kidding.
Family. Same people that created ISIS, same people created Al Qaeda, same people created Mujahideen. It's like a terrorist incubator that they run in Pakistan, the Khan family.
Wow.
So it's just it's a ruse. And what we got to remember is it's just a ruse. And so there's a lot, it's like the Who song, you know, don't get fooled again. And I just swear to God, we just keep getting fooled, Mike.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And that's why we're glad to be able to talk with you today and try to give us a bigger picture perspective. And it's so easy to get caught in the tribalism of left versus right. And at times I'm guilty of that myself, but I always try to step back as much as I can and say, wait a minute, we're all being manipulated here. Like we're caught in the reactions to the scripts that the globalists have already written. They are playing all of us every day, including with this war in Israel. It's all part of their script. They needed this. They engineered many of these events, including 9/11, for example, completely engineered event in order to achieve their goals. But Dean, we're out of time. I want to ask you to kind of, how do you put an end cap on this today? What do you want people to remember from this interview?
Well, I just like to say that, you know, what the answer to all this, Mike, is two things. The answer is, first of all, learn to understand the nature of reality. Don't get caught in the screen trap and spend all your time on computers and internet fighting with people about stupid things. Go outside, look at the trees, the rocks, be grateful. Every day, get up, be grateful for one thing. I was grateful for the coffee plant this morning, best plant I know. And also, I just want to say people need to unify. Yeah, people need to unify outside of the two-party system, outside of politics. It's not about religion. It's not about sectarianism. It's not about, you know, dividing people. The only answer to taking on this head of the snake, this one bloodline, this Habsburg bloodline that runs the world and has for 8,500 years, is to unify, become aware. Once we become aware, once everybody's on the same page, it goes, wow, that really did happen. Oh my God. You know, and it did happen. You got to just dig into yourself. Don't believe me. Don't believe Mike. Just go check it out. But go check it out. Don't be scared, because Jesus said you shouldn't be scared. You should tell the truth, right? So tell the truth. The truth's being thrown under the bus, and let's be unified. Let's not let, you know, race or religion or party or any of that get in our way, man, because the only chance we have is to unify. And I really appreciate having me today, Mike. I appreciate the work you've done over the years. Thanks, brother, for being in the fight.
Thank you, Dean. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm with you on this main point, which is, you know, when one tribe fights another tribe, like Palestine and Israel, the globalists are laughing all the way. They don't care who kills who. It's just human beings killing each other, and that serves the interests of the elitists who are in charge right now. But maybe we have an opportunity to set humanity free from that global planetary scale enslavement. And I think, Dean, that it's people like you and your work and research and writings that are going to help wake up humanity. So thank you for all that you do.
Appreciate it, man. All right, brother. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. And folks, the website is deanhenderson.substack.com if you want to follow his work and check out his books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Again, Dean Henderson is the author name and our guest here today. And I know we've covered a lot of interesting topics here, some controversial topics for sure, but that's what we're here to do on Brighteon.com, our free speech platform, which is not afraid to ask the really big questions like, why are we here? How did we get here? Where is all of this going? And what should we be attempting to do as human beings to establish freedom and dignity for all human beings. And that's where I'm coming from as well. So thank you for watching today. You may repost this interview on other channels and other platforms, or just share this link on brighteon.com. Bless you all. I'm Mike Adams. Thank you for watching today. Take care.